Okay, so let's talk about Minneapolis, where the line between protest and, well, something else got seriously blurred. We're diving into the story of SignalGate, a story about a hidden network of activists, a really dramatic undercover investigation, and some wild allegations of a conspiracy that reached all the way to the top of the state government. And this all comes from a deep dive report by the Shasta Beacon.
Yeah, and that's the big question right out of the gate, isn't it? When does an organized protest cross a line and become something else entirely? That is the debate at the absolute heart of this whole controversy, which people have started calling SignalGate.
So here's how we're going to break it all down. First, we'll kick things off on the streets with the clash in Minneapolis. Then, you'll meet the undercover journalist who blew the lid off this thing. After that, we're going inside their encrypted signal network. From there, we'll look at the alleged connections to state power, and we'll wrap it up with the federal investigation that's going on right now. All right, so let's set the scene. Our story really gets going in early 2026, where the whole political climate around immigration enforcement basically created a powder keg in Minnesota just waiting to go off. It all started after a renewed push for mass deportations led to ICE seriously ramping up its presence in Minnesota. And as you'd expect, local activists mobilized fast to push back. But then, the tension just exploded after a U.S. citizen named Alex Preddy was shot and killed by federal agents. That incident sparked massive outrage and took the protests to a whole new level of intensity. So you can just imagine the scene on the ground. It was total chaos. The investigation describes these intense moments where crowds would swarm ICE vehicles, they'd block the entrances to hotels where the agents were staying, and they'd get into these direct confrontations with federal personnel right there on the streets of Minneapolis. So how did this whole hidden world of activist coordination even get exposed? Well, it all comes down to the work of one single journalist who went undercover. A journalist named Cam Higby decided to go deep undercover. He basically just pretended to be a supporter. He filled out some public sign-up forms he found on activist websites, gave them his personal info so they could vet him, and it worked. He eventually got access to the nerve center of the whole operation, these private, encrypted chat groups on the Signal app. And then, the bombshell. On January 24th, Higby went public. He started this thread on X and just began dropping everything he'd found, screenshots, audio clips, even training manuals from inside the network. This was the exact moment SignalGate exploded into public view. Higby's threat wasn't just about who was involved, it was about how they were doing it. So let's peel back the curtain and take a look at the technology and the tactics they were allegedly using. Now, the whole operation hinged on this app called Signal. If you don't know it, it's a messaging app that's famous for its super strong end-to-end encryption. I mean, its security features made it the perfect tool for coordinating activities that you really, really want to keep hidden from law enforcement. And what the report lays out is this surprisingly sophisticated system. It was broken down into 3 clear roles. First, you had the observers, who were basically lookouts, spotting ICE agents. Then you had dispatchers inside the chats, coordinating the group's response in real time. And finally, you had the chasers, who were sent out to follow and actively get in the way of federal agents. And to really drive home just how organized this was, Higby made a pretty stunning comparison. He claimed that the level of coordination he saw was, and I'm quoting him here, far more organized than what happened on January 6th. Okay, hold on, because this is where the story goes from a street-level protest to something much, much bigger. The investigation didn't just point to activists on the street. It alleged direct links to the very highest levels of Minnesota's state government. And get this, the report names some very high-profile people. Amanda Kohler, a campaign strategist for Governor Walz, was allegedly an admin in these Signal chats. Assistant Attorney General Ann Keeling reportedly offered up her state email to help coordinate things. The report even points to Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan as a principal organizer, and it accuses Governor Tim Walz himself of basically encouraging all this interference with his public statements. And the list didn't stop there. The investigation also led to federal subpoenas being sent to other major political players in the state, including the mayor of Minneapolis, Jacob Frey, and Minnesota's Attorney General, Keith Ellison. You know, with accusations this serious, reaching all the way up to the governor's office, you can probably guess what happened next. Yep, the Department of Justice stepped in. And this wasn't just a casual inquiry. The DOJ moved fast, subpoenaing at least 6 officials and other figures tied to the case. It was a clear signal that a major criminal investigation into this whole SignalGate scandal was officially underway. And the charges they're looking at? These are no joke. We're talking about serious federal crimes, like obstruction of federal operations, conspiracy, and even racketeering, RICO charges. That's the kind of thing usually used to go after organized crime.
Now, as you can imagine, there are two completely different ways of looking at all this. On one side, you have supporters of Higby's investigation who see him as a brave journalist exposing what they call a dangerous leftist insurrection, some even using the term domestic terrorism. But on the other side, you have critics who say his work is just biased surveillance targeting activists, and they point to his known conservative leanings as proof of a political hit job.
And just so we're all on the same page, everything we've talked about here, it all comes from that one investigative report, Unmasking SignalGate, which was published by the Shasta Beacon.
So that brings us right back to where we started, with this really thorny question that this whole story forces us to think about. In our world today, when you've got activism, technology, and government power all colliding like this, where exactly do we draw the line between what one person calls community defense and what another calls a criminal conspiracy?